Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining our webinar today. And for some of you, it still could be morning, I guess, depending on what side of the country you're on. We're excited about today's webinar. We're going to do a continuation of our last session, different case study, but we're going to finish up some items that we had. We had a really good time of questions and answers, so we'd encourage each of you who are on the webinar from last week to type in your questions that you thought of since the webinar of last week, and maybe we can try to attack some of those questions here as we get through some administration items on the front end. I would like to also welcome a guest on the webinar today that I see has joined us. Mr. Bob Lemon is the academic analyst that used to manage our software in the Excel version, and actually really got the program alive and managed our paraplanning for about 8 years in our office before Robert took over and took that, and then we created the software that we have today. So Bob, nice shout out to you, and thanks for being interested enough to find out what's going on with RNG. And of course, you're very responsible for keeping this thing alive. So glad to have you this afternoon joining us, I think from Virginia. And then I want to also indicate that we will today for Robert, though we may go over just a touch for any questions that we may have. Robert has a hard stop today just before 1 o'clock, so content will cease maybe a couple minutes before 1 o'clock so he can get on another obligated call that he has, and I can linger for some additional questions depending on interest of the group. I do want to highlight today we have promoted this Thrive Advanced training. It's just for 10 people only. It's going to be in my Burlington office where we used to hold all the Thrive universities back years ago. We've actually held a few Thrive universities on purpose, since then here for Midwest folks. But we are going to have this Thrive Advanced expansive case design training. It's October 16th to the 18th, and what I'm showing you is the actual website. When you go to the website, I'll just kind of show you where you're going. Here is you go to curtiscloak.com and you see Thrive University. You click on more information. If you scroll down, you'll see register for the class, and then this is the site that I'm showing you. And so here we're going to talk about complete from the beginning of how a decision is made to take the raw materials of a client's discovery and then decide how to case design and case construct that case, and then decide, once you get the mere facts in the case, how do you start testing? What do you test, and what fact patterns do you test for? What causes you to think about using one set of product allocations versus another? So this is going to be a deep dive. It's 3 days. It's really 2.5 days. We're going to fly Robert to the office. You're going to be in our laboratory right here in the home office, and we're going to have 2.5 days of completely case construction, case design, and engineering, and how to plug that in and do the testing inside the software. This is the first time we'll ever do this type of class, and there will be no discounts because of limited space. We've already got a few signups in this class, so we do not have 10 seats left. First come, first serve. We're advancing the information ahead of time, and if you enjoy what you're getting out of the webinar and you really want to come sit down and get your hands dirty on the tools with the experts, it'll be Robert and myself here in our laboratory for 2.5 days. And so here's where you can register and do that. And of course, the price of this class is $23.99. So be sure and register early. Like I said, I think we have 3 already signed up for that class. One signed up the day we opened it up. They were so anxious to get what was next, and I know they're on the call today. So with that, Robert, let's see. I may have some early questions here. Let me just take a peek. Not getting the video.
You're not sharing your screen yet.
I'm not. Oh, wished I'd have known that. So stop sharing screen. Available only to the presenter. Hold on a minute. I got to figure out what's going on with sharing the screen here. Oh. thanks for letting me know that. Everybody see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Not seeing, okay. All right. Well, we should be live now. I apologize for that. Again, it's if you go to Thrive University, thriveu.net, thriveulive.com, you'll get to the page that you can click on the registration, and this is where you sign up. And I know it'll give you the commentary, but this is where you register. I'll take you back since the screen wasn't live. I apologize for that. This is if you just simply do curtiscloak.com, and it gives you the choice to click on Thrive University. And if you scroll down here, you can click on, register today for Thrive Advanced, and then it gets you this page, and down below is where you'd register for the class. So I thought everybody was seeing my screen. I'm sorry that you didn't. I think we're ready to go. So with that, Robert, I'm going to pivot control to you.
All right. So where we left off, let's start talking about where we left off. We started last week. We went through the discovery process and looked at common mistakes in the discovery process. Now, obviously, data input won't be a mistake in the analysis. I mean, except your own typos, it's putting in the right data is already put in. However, there are mistakes in approaching how to solve and enter data on the solve side. And what we're going to do today is talk about what to look for and what to do and what will happen, how you maybe should approach putting in your solve, in what order and things of that genre. So let's talk about your finishing up numbers. When you go to the analysis tab, this is where we're going to start doing our solutions. Before you start, we talked about putting the data in and making sure your mistakes are. And we talked about if you saw unusual anomalies in your graphs, such as spikes or quick falls, that may be a data entry thing. Even if things look good, you may want to come to your reports and take a quick understanding what's going on to understand what problems we have, all right, and what we may be facing, what mistakes we may have data entered wrong. So what you want to do is verify that all these numbers are what they're supposed to be. These are the client need numbers. We want to come through here, make sure they make sense. And for example, we have a mortgage and that's going to be paid off. Does that sound right? Make sure that seems right. They had other expenses that was for 4 years. Does that make sense? Go through these numbers, make sure. We have our medical, make sure the medical makes sense. Once we know all the things look right, then we're fine with the cash need. You may want to stop at your income tax, just not necessarily know what's here because you're probably not going to, in a lot of cases, not know. But the one thing you want to keep in mind from planning strategy is absorb the data and see what's happening. Come over to the end, see where your client is in terms of tax brackets. See if they have a Medicare surcharge tax. Maybe we can mitigate that. See what brackets they fall into. See if there's room for a capacity potentially in your mind for Roth conversions. All right. Now, the other thing to go to is your cash flow report. Look at that. Make sure that makes sense. This is your sources of cash. Make sure all the sources of cash make sense. My client was going to retire here. That's fine. That makes sense. Here's my Social Security. That makes sense. If there was a pension, make sure it's there. Other incomes, whatever it might be, go through the line of things, make sure they make sense. Now, I'll give you a tidbit of information to pay attention to. Up to here's what's guaranteed, here's what's needed. And this is the net, shortfall or surplus. If there's a shortfall, it's going to show you where the dollars are going to come from to meet that shortfall. One of the things to pay attention is when your client turns 70 and a half, and in this case, that would be around 2020, 21, and then 23 for the 24 for the spouse. I mention that is take a gander so you know from our planning what you can read from the reports where you may be going. And that would mean if I went to 2021 and I had a shortfall, and in this case I have a shortfall of 21,000 and 16,000, and I see my qualified assets are half of that. That's fine. But if I notice that this number here is larger than the amount I need, that's probably because I have RMDs coming out, and those RMDs are actually greater than my income need. Keep that back in your head, because what your client's going to experience, which many clients do, is they get to age 70 and a half, and even if they have no guaranteed income, they're forced to take dollars out whether they like them or not. That's not a good thing, right? Because even that will force me in a sequence of returns issue. Because why? Yes, I could sell, I could take the money out and then go buy the equivalent stock and put myself back into it. But the problem with that, of course, I'm forced to pay the income taxes when I don't want to. And that income tax I can't get back. So we want to keep those concepts in our head, see how things are flowing, read what's going on with the numbers. This is going to be a chess game down the line. Today's not about a chess game. I'm just going to give you a heads up how you prepare yourself for that chess game. I'm not going to tell you the moves today. That's not the point of today. But I'm telling you how to make sure you don't make a mistake in that chess game. Even if you really know what you're doing, read your numbers, see what's going on. That said, the final thing you do is check your balance sheet.
Hey, Robert, if I could just interject real quick. When you were on the income tax statement, maybe if you could go back there, I want to have you scroll over to where it talked about surcharge tax, Medicare surcharge.
Yes.
And if you take a look at, if you scroll to the right, you'll see there was a couple years of surcharge tax. If you scroll to the right, Robert, see the Medicare surcharge. So keep in mind that this is dynamic to tax. Now, those are working years, so probably nothing we can do about that. But let's assume you're doing a retirement plan where the Medicare surcharge tax is in the retirement years. Now, remember, you can also go to the cash flow needs and see what their Medicare Part B is. And remember, this is dynamic to tax. This is dynamic to Medicare Part B, and the tiering cost of the increased Part B and the IRMA charges that are now applicable given the Medicare Part B and the income scenario. Since we're doing the tax return, we can also quantify that. So when you're doing something that uses life insurance as tax-free income as opposed to taxable income from investable accounts, or you're doing something with non-qualified income annuities that have an exclusion ratio, and you start solving the case, you'll find that it doesn't take a whole lot sometimes to bring down an exclusion factor rather than a full taxable factor, even if it's off of capital gains tax treatment or tax-free distribution from old Roth conversions that we did in the front end of retirement to actually, and when we're contrasting the baseline, which is what you see now, versus the solution. So this is automatically going to frame for you the effect of those taxes and those lower cost of tiering of Medicare Part B going away. So I just want you to see what the opportunities are, how detailed this is, so that when you're doing the scenarios, when you frame up the dashboard and you got the green line popping up, well, a lot of times the question is, well, why is that? Well, as soon as I'm using a no annual fee drag product, such as an income annuity, for example, that has exclusion ratio, and we have Medicare surcharge tax that goes away, and we drop them one or two tiers of Medicare Part B, and we eliminate the fee drag from what was being fee dragged in their portfolio before, all those dynamic impacts then change the lines that are applicable in the dashboard. And so you don't have to think about that heavy lifting. That heavy lifting is done by the artificial intelligence under the hood. But these are the kinds of things that you're looking for. And as he's going through these data, I want you to data mine the opportunities that you can actually start thinking about trying to solve when you see these things.
Okay, so and again, that was the purpose of what I'm going through here, is when you want to read reports, but it's a little more advanced, and I don't want to go down that road today, but reading reports and eventually understanding what's happening, as Curtis said, helps you understand where there's opportunity to fix things or improve things. All right, let's talk about now back to the basics. So how do I approach, or should you approach, putting in data? Now, again, it's a chess game. And the better you get at it, the fewer moves you have to make. However, to start with, for most people, it's not that easy, and we understand that. And so to approach that is, you can have as many solutions as you can. So if I'm starting out, what I might do is create different solution tabs to test each item. All right. So for example, I may create a Social Security test. And by the way, I open this up, and you see, when you open up, you see these 6 blocks. You can change anything just right here if you want, but we create these shortcut blocks. These are fundamentally the basic things you should attack on the surface. There are finer, smaller things you can attack, but these are the most common we'd want to attack, and generally in the order you'd want to attack them. Now, if I open up the Social Security, what I've done here is I made only difference in this solution is that I looked at taking delayed Social Security versus taking full Social Security. And I can see the difference in benefit for the client. So I can open this up. And I can see all I did was simply test my different Social Security options. And I can see this was probably the best solution for my client. Is it a major difference? No, it's not. It's a minor difference, but it's nonetheless, remember, we're going to build and build and build on improving things. And it's still a $380,000 gain at the end of the day. You can show and see where the crossover is on this. And you can also see that by doing this, I create higher distributions in the beginning with lower in the end. There's give and take, and you have to understand what you're doing. So when you make the test, understand what's happening. Now, the problem is, as we go through each one of these tests, different things will happen. So in standalone situation, doing delayed Social Security looks better. It may not be when you start adding them to the final solution. It may not be the case. You may elect not to do the Social Security test. You may delay. You may not do that. But from a beginner point of view, to understand what's happening and to avoid making mistakes, I generally would set up what I think I'm going to test, create a solution for each item, and test that item to see how it's reacting or interacting. So I know now by doing a delayed Social Security, I'm going to increase my exposure in the beginning and help myself overall. I know the risk and reward of doing a delayed Social Security. If I have a plan in my head, now I understand how that's going to affect that plan. I keep that in mind and I lay that out. Now I've done a test. I know what works best. I move on to my next test. So my next test might be, now if we go back to the main screen here, we put you in order. So I may have a second test, and that test is I'm looking at buying a bucket. So I'm going to click on that bucket, that test. And that was my core thing in this. Hold on. Okay. My core thing here, I'm going to get rid of this for a second. Buying my bucket alone. All right. Now, I look at buying my bucket alone, and at the end of the day, it puts me ahead of the game, right? But it takes to the end of the game, right? But we're not done yet, because I know my big picture, I'm taking $2 million in this case of this client's $5 million, and I'm putting it into a fixed product. I'm surely not going to keep the rest of my assets in fixed or a high fixed percentage now. Because the point of doing that was this over here. I moved my guaranteed income up substantially. Now I see what happens with this, and I understand what's happening. I've improved what I'm trying to do, and that was build up this reliability of income. Now I know once I add Social Security, I'll build this up even more. And maybe do one or two other things, I'll build up even more. And I know I've reduced my withdrawal rates to a relatively safe, with just this alone, I keep myself under 4% more than 2/3 the way. So I know I've already put myself in a position that if I take risk in the marketplace, I probably do a stress test, I'd be okay with this. I'd be in a lot better shape. But I'm not done. So again, I know I want to look at each item one at a time, see how it reacts, and see the impact. Now, I'm going to move to the third item, which would be rebalancing my portfolio. Now, I simply rebalanced my portfolio and all I did was, this client was 60-40 and I moved him to 90-10 on his equity positions. Everything else I kept at 60-40. But on $1.5 million of his $5 or $6 million, I moved to from 60-40 to 90-10. And I look at that and say, wow, that alone makes a wonderful day. The problem is, this does not reduce my risk. And if I look, my improvement, by the way, improves by 2.4 million. So now let's do a stress test on this. Let's see what would happen if we had volatile markets compared to the baseline, which is 60-40. I'm going to start a stress test. Let's start that in 2019. And what do I learn? Look at that. I'm 90-10 versus 60-40, and I didn't improve my situation. Taking more risk throughout my lifetime does not make me any better. I'm running out of money almost identically the same time. So going for higher yield didn't actually improve my situation. It didn't solve what my biggest issue is, running out of money. And in the real world, that green line would be worse. Why? So follow the line. The red is 4.2, green. My 90-10 is less than my red, which is 60-40. 4.2, 4.1, 4.1, 4 nothing, 4.39, 3.9. The red line is ahead of the green line. That means the low risk portfolio, 60-40, is ahead of the 90-10. In fact, I'm all the way out to 75, 78. I'm at 79. My client's at age 80, and I'm at the same exact point at 90-10 versus 640, 60-40. But here's the real thing. In the real world, by this point in time, would I be willing to stay in 90-10? Nope. What 80-year-old keeps their money at a 90-10 position? They'd have to then switch. They went 15 years and never got ahead because they're consuming their assets in down markets and then never getting a chance in the up markets. And by the time we get 20 years out, 15 years out, they don't have a chance to chase anymore. And you can bet that green line would actually be below the red line at that point the rest of their life. So the point is, my client, you think the client here, when they're here they're down, they're 75 and they're down $100,000. They're down $100,000 at 77. At 77, they have 60-40 in equity fixed in the baseline and 90-10 in the SOV, and the SOV has 100,000 less. And you know at that point, that client's not going to be 90-10. They're going to be moving to 60-40. And they're behind, they're less money. So taking more risk isn't solving my problem. But it's worth doing to see that if we looked at a linear model, sure enough, taking more risk is great. How do I mitigate that risk, though? Well, part of it was we already did that, and that was buying income. So now, just remember, just changing risk portfolio gained me 2.4. When we sum this all up together, I bet you will be more than 2.4 ahead. But let's continue. The next step, we might want to test Roth. Now, this is a tough one, so let's talk about Roth testing. Very tough one to isolate. Why? Let's open up that. And this is a key thing, people make mistakes. The Roth should be the last thing you deal with. You really shouldn't be dealing with any Roth conversions till you've done everything else. Why? Because everything affects the tax burden or your cash flow. So if I just looked at the Roth alone, starting right now, let's look at this. Notice I have nothing for 2020. Over here shows you your bracket capacity. You see that 28,000? That doesn't mean you have $28,000 that you can convert. It means you have 28,000 to the next bracket. Remember, when you convert dollars, depending on where you take them from, if you're taking them from qualified, non-qualified dollars, then you could take 28. Well, you have some capital gains maybe, the taxes to pay. But if you take them if you pay the tax burden from your non-qualified pile, the burden will be pretty easy to handle because it'll be mostly tax-free. But if you're taking to pay the taxes from the conversion from qualified dollars, meaning you're going to have to liquidate qualified dollars to pay the taxes of the conversion, well, that's going to create a tax burden. So let me show you what I mean. If I put 25,000 here, you think I should have money left over because it says 28,000. Well, I'll put the 25 in. And now I hit the 24% bracket. I can't do 25. So pay attention when you do that. Just because it says you have 28, you really don't. I'll do 20,000. and now I still have $5,000 of capacity. That $20,000 cost me $3,000 in taxes. So you've got to pay attention to that to not make a mistake, and understand just because you do it on a standalone, this is not necessarily going to be available for me when I put everything together, because everything will change. Don't make that mistake. But at least this gives you an idea when you come here to see where your client's going to have tax exposure and no tax exposure. And you can scroll down and look at this client's 24, then 22. They're going to be in 24 in the latter years. You'd love to save them there. It's only a couple percent, but if you can get them down a couple of percent so they don't have to take dollars at 24% because of RMDs, we'd like to do that if we could. All right.
So
now,
Robert, can I interject here? So I'm going to try something new today. There is a place that you can raise your hand. I did see some folks last webinar try to do that, and we could try some live questions. If you have a question that you would like to ask, if you know how to there's a link that you can kind of raise your hand. I'll unmute your mic, and you can ask the question directly of Robert if you have any. If you're more comfortable typing in your question, you can certainly do that. So if you've got questions as we're going through some of the topics, feel free to let us know. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay, so now the reason I create these folders for each item, and then I have a solution folder. The solution is going to be the folder or the tab that I'm going to add all the things into. All right, and that's what I'm going to do in a second. But you have the ability to test all these things. Now I'm going to go back to the last. So let's do one more test. I forgot to label this one, but let's go back and to my analysis. And what did I do on this one? This one is I went and managed my liabilities. My client had, if I open that up, my client had a $200,000 mortgage, 4%, and their monthly payment's $4,000. This will be done in 4 or 5 years. But first of all, there's a new tax law. There's probably little or no tax deductibility here. However, I then might want to look at maybe I want better cash flow because maybe I'm doing delayed Social Security. So maybe I refinance out to 30 years. If your client can emotionally do that, it may make sense. It may not make sense. But you can put it in and see what kind of benefit you get out of it. You can open up and see, okay, my client comes out ahead in the beginning. However, time will catch up to me as I keep paying those loans and the interest on that loan. So I improve actually my front end discretionary at the expense of my rear end. And I actually lose money in the long haul. All right. I'm paying interest on money at 4%, and my portfolio is probably overall after fees and the balance act I've got, it's only 3.8, 3.7, 3.6. So I'm actually losing money all the way around. I'm paying more in interest than I'm probably getting in my portfolio. So you kind of have to weigh that out, but it may be of use for you because what did it do? You can see modestly, it dropped that little spike there. And I may want to do that for the purposes of delayed Social Security. Maybe I want to drop my mortgage payment for a couple of years, and then I'll refinance that. I can afford it maybe to refinance it back to a 5 or 10 year loan in 4 or 5 years, whatever. You can use that to at least, again, separate and see what it's going to do and the impact and cost to you. Once
Robert,
you've built that knowledge base in your head, you're ready to start putting yourself together.
so there's a question from Scott Foster. Says, I'm not clear on for Social Security. So Scott, I'm going to unmute your mic and maybe you can clarify your question because I'm not sure I can totally understand. So see if it'll let me do that. So Scott, retype your question because it's not letting me unmute your mic. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. So I'm not sure your question exactly. We got another question. Husband delays stage 70, wife at 62, can take her own Social Security higher than half the husband dies. Does the wife get full husband or does she get some reduction because she began hers at 62, and how is that figured? So Robert, when you take in one spouse that's getting less, her benefit's less than half of his, how's that working in terms of the payment that's being provided?
So what'll happen is upon his death, she will step up to his benefit. That's that straightforward and simple. Even if she took at 62 and she took less than half of his. And
The only way that you get any part of his benefit is if you wait till full retirement age after he or whatever the other spouse is full retirement age. Otherwise, when you take your benefit, you've trumped your benefit in that particular scenario.
And I should actually go over a few things here, which is important, which I did kind of jump. Mistakes. Remember, revision review here. This already collecting field, when you put that in, that overrides anything here. If there's a value here, that's what will go, and it will start the date you pick. Please do not forget your COLA. And we talked about this the last time, restricted benefits. There are limited to restricted benefits. We calculate that automatically. If you don't qualify, you can't get it, so it doesn't matter. You can't screw up by picking that. If you qualify, you qualify. To qualify, your clients have to be born before January 1, 1953. January 1, 1954. On or before January 1, 1954. If your client was born on January 1, 1954, they're still in. January 2, they're out. And so very soon.
It's interesting. We had a conversation with Tom Hagna. We're working on some revisions to his plan, and we brought this up that restricted filing goes away for anybody born after 1954. Tom didn't realize that. He thought that file and suspend went away, but the restricted filing was still good. So there's still a lot of folks out there that actually are not clear about what's happening with this restricted filing and the fact that we've got a limited time before that's not even going to be a plausibility anymore.
Yeah, you got next year basically, and and then after that that's it. So, but we'll keep that there until that window's getting smaller and smaller. All right. So back to my solution tab. So
hey Robert, we had a couple more questions I'd like to squeeze in here real quick before you get there, if you don't mind. And we had a question about back on the stress test. Stress test, it looked like it was using returns that began in 2000. If true, then it would seem that 90-10 would be more favorable because it wasn't worse than 60-40. I'm trying to read the rest of that question.
All right, so let's answer that. Let's go talk about that. And let's do that 2000. Now, remember I got 90-10, 640, right? The stress test only applies to the equity portion of your portfolio, right? So the problem for this client is that now they have more dollars that in a bad market, and the stress test is starting with a bad market, their portfolio balance at 90-10 versus 60-40 will be less because in 2000, for example, you lost 25% on your equities. Well, if you have 90% in equities, let's just talk about $100. I have $90 equities, 10 fixed. If I lose 25% of the 90, that's 22 and a half. My 100 is going to fall down to 100 less 22 and a half, or 77 and a half. If I have 60-40 and my 60 falls by 25%, that's 15. So 100 falls from 100 to 85. So with the 60-40 after year's end, I'm at 85 versus 78 or 77 and a half. So 60-40 is actually doing better. Now, I haven't done sequence of returns. I haven't had to distribute dollars out. Now I got to distribute dollars out. And don't forget, I'm cheating myself. My 85 is 40% in fixed, which is getting a return. So it wouldn't be 85. It'd be actually higher. The 77.5 only has 10% fixed. So there's very little upside, whereas the other has some upside. So one might be actually at 87 and 88 versus 78. So there's already a big difference there. And now I have to do a sequence return issue. I got to take out $5 from both piles. And guess what? I'm not coming, the market comes back, I'm not getting that $5 back on the lower pile. The other
one more question before you go back to the case study you were on. This is from Gail Van Ness. During the next 8 years with the lower tax rates and a possible conversion, did it make sense to somewhat take the IRMA surcharge at the current time? What if you were paying the taxes? Okay, go ahead.
Very great question. And that is a very good, a really good question. Is it what I can make the same argument about Roth conversions? It may, I may have a client who's in the 22% bracket right now and very well argue go for the 24% bracket, because why not? Because the reality is last year, everyone in the 24 would have been in the 28, and a lot of people in the 22 would have been in the 25. You wouldn't have been in the 22. So even at the 24, if the tax rates go up back to where they were, the 22 would be at 25, 24 would be at 28. So you might as well take everything at 24. That's a winner, because the very least you're going to be is paying 25, if not 28 or higher. So yes, there's a real argument to doing a Roth conversion or capturing more income and and taking a bite on that surcharge tax, which would be 0.9% on retirement plans and 3.9% on your equities or your fixed income. So yes, there is an argument for that. But the problem with that is we assume the tax rates stay low forever. So that's not going to show as much a benefit as you think. It might even show a loser situation. But that's where you have to educate your client. Listen, doing all these Roth conversions at the end of the day cost us $100,000 to move $1 million or $2 million. It cost you $100,000 more to do it. But that's assuming that tax rates stay low forever. And you can make that argument to the client: I create liquidity and I'm protecting against rates going up. It may be worth paying $100,000. That's a different discussion for a different day. But that is a good point, a good question. All right.
Go ahead.
So now, going back to this, I hope people understand what happens here. No matter when you get a sequence of returns issue, no matter how much you start piling on the return, unless you make, I've gone to 90-10 here, it isn't going to make a difference, because what's really happening is I'm going to get this lower return now on 4.3, and I have my fixed at 3 less 0.5% in fees. Remember, my equities, I've got a 1% fee drag. My fixed, I have a 0.5% fee drag. So here I'm probably netting 3.3 after fees on an average, and on my fixed, I'm averaging 2.5. Not a big difference there for the risk volatility of having down markets in the early years. And that's why the 60-40 can almost keep pace through the lifetime. Again, who's going to be 90-10 here? The equities can finally get, when it gets all the way out to here, the equities have a chance to catch up. Maybe, but the problem is, who's going to be 90-10 there, right? That said, all right, now I'm going to go and talk about piling things together. So I did each one of these separately so I could understand what's happening. By the way, if I were testing annuities, I'd probably do the same thing. I'd probably test 5 or 6 different annuities and see what their impacts are. But I have to have all this in my head to understand they may not add up together. So I'm going to kick on my solution now. Oops, sorry. I put my solution together. And what did I do in my solution? I refinanced my mortgage. I did my Social Security, remanaged my non-qualified account, and I bought that bucket. When I put it all together, I am at 6.3 versus 5.3 versus 2. Even with the equities alone, doing 90-10 and in a linear position, I was, 2.4 I said better? Well, now I'm 3.3 better. The things added up together better. Now, the point was, if I looked at any one of them separately, I would have mitigated risk enough and I would have blown up. By the way, if I did I'm going to show you something. I'm going to go back to my annuity. I'm doing this blind, folks. Never even tested this. But I wouldn't be surprised if I stress test that this failed by doing the annuity alone. Now I made it. All right, I did make it. You see my line is very linear because effectively I have guaranteed income and a lot less equities to play with. I do make it, but I don't improve my client's position very much. All right, and that's where I'm going to come back and try to improve their position. By the way, let me do that one more time, just so you know why I didn't know if this would make it. As I told you, we've got 4.33 here, right? So that's 4.33 less a percent in fees. My equities are doing 3.33. That means for me to do better, I have to get an annuity to have an IRR greater than 3.33. Clearly, my IRR is better than 3.33. It's probably around 3.6, 3.7. So I could get away and make it, but I'm not building wealth for my client. And on the upside, I would fail for this client, right? I thought I solved the downside, and they don't have to worry on the downside, but I don't help them on an upside. If I look at the upside, I lose. So what am I doing? I know that I can take risk now. I definitely know I can take risk. So now I'm going to pile all the things together, and I'm going to go here. And I'm going to look. I put all the things together, the mortgage, the Social Security. And what I've done is if I open this up and I look at this, now I probably could do a little better. I still have a pretty high distribution rate here. I probably want to fix that, but I'm not going to go crazy right now for this show. But you can see after that period of time, I don't go over 2 until in the 90s. I have all this free liquidity forever. So my client, if I do my stress test, should have no problem surviving. And the reason is very simple. Again, once you get your withdrawal rates so low, and the reason I have low withdrawal rates is I have, 80% of my income guaranteed. In a bad market, I have 80% of my income guaranteed, right? And I do better. And in a good market, do even better, right? So it's not I don't lose my opportunity, because why? I now could take that 90-10 where I couldn't before. Before I couldn't do 90-10. Now I can.
So Robert, here's what I want to interject. When we were in Thrive University, we were talking about FOMO, the fear of missing out. So think about when you're trying to contrast with these lines where you're really not necessarily talking to the client about product. You're just saying, hey, the red line is what your composition of assets based on the movie that you're playing in your mind the day that you walked in the door. And that's the math and science based on today until the last spouse is perceived to survive, given the analytics and the specs to those analytics that you ask us to test out. And that's the red line. The green line is using our intellect with all the things that we can do, taking advantage of tax optimization, Social Security optimization, pension optimization, fee drag elimination, and we're showing you how we can improve the same dollars in the same tax code and the same dream, and then creating a much better picture for you in terms of safety and performance. And when we can look at that in a linear calculation and we win, we're really not convinced that we've done the best that we can do. But when we stress test it against the worst of times, we can certainly say we've de-risked it from the potential failure that the red line or the baseline would have created. The real question is, what if the market did well, not poorly? Did we leave anything on the table by buying the guarantees? And what we can prove out here is that no, we didn't leave money on the table at all. In fact, we have greater performance. Why? How is that possible? Well, here's the easy antidote to answer that question. If I can only take a safe withdrawal over a 30-plus year duration of retirement from a portfolio of fixed income and equity growth and constrain my portfolio appropriately for that distribution of 3% or 4% or whatever the number is, then if I buy income at 65, husband and wife, and I'm talking installment or cash, I'm going to get about a 5.5% distribution rate. Well, I can't take safely 5.5 from a market portfolio constrained to a safe withdrawal rate. And that means that I'm going to use almost half the money to generate the same income with a distribution rate that's forever. I've taken longevity risk off the table, and now I don't have to constrain the portfolio in the market for safe withdrawal rates because I'm creating the high distribution from the income guarantees. And because I can chase those equities, because I have 30 years to make that money grow, I simply don't sacrifice performance. So half the battle of getting people over the FOMO is proving that they don't miss out if they accept your anecdotal solutions. And all the biases that they have to, I've lost control. It's really an illusion of control. It's not that they control it at all. Now we've given them lots of control. So that's really a key reason why buying income and investing the difference works. Now, that doesn't mean that the software only does that. You can do a SWIP. Obviously, the red line in this case is a SWIP strategy. You can do a bucket time segment strategy. You can do a floor strategy. And really, when we get all done, most of the cases turn out being what we call the hybrid strategy. Hey, Robert, just a quick question. Then the final solution, how do you lump each strategy into the final solution? It's a question from Al.
Okay, so ultimately, I went through these. I created a solution to test each item. So I educate myself on what these things that I'm going to do, what are the consequences of them. And then once I tested them, I create a new solution. I call it solution. And then I start just putting in what I thought worked the best. And I would say, okay, I want to put the Social Security in. I want to put this in. I don't want to do the refi, whatever it would be. After I've tested, I use the different solutions to test ideas. And then I create one solution where I start adding them and seeing the consequences. Now, the only caveat to that was, remember I did that Roth. And remember, if I showed you the Roth originally, when you did it standalone, the problem with Roth, unlike anything else, it really has to be done last after you do everything, because you don't know what those dollars will be. So standalone, I only had $25,000 and $28,000 in 2020 and 21. Now I have twice the dollars. So I have more I could do for Roth conversion. Why? Because when I integrated the refi, it created less cash flow needs in those early years, which gives me more space for Roth conversions. Now, there are other things I can do, and I'm not going to get into that today, because there are a lot of the strategies you can do. That's not what the purpose of today is, telling you how to do the Roth conversions. It's just to tell you, when you do the Roth, if that's going to be part of your goal, that should be the last thing you do into your plan, because you don't know what dollars you're going to have available. All right? So keep that in mind, because that's going to change it. So in this case, I didn't add the Roth. I can now add the Roth to my solution. Otherwise, if I go back to my solution, you will see listed here at the bottom all my changes. Now, I'm done with the solution test for you, how I would work through the solution. However, it's now to talk about presentation time. Now, a couple of things.
Before you go to presentation time, can you test doing more than Roth and increasing the amounts to 24 bracket? Gail Van Ness asked that question. So just as you're dealing with the Roth.
Sure. So someone wants to see, okay, well, what would happen if I went another bracket? Sure. Once I have my solution here, let's first open this up and see right now. I'm ahead of the game by 515,637. Right? 515,637. Let's say 516,000, 3,516,000. I can look and say, okay, let's add a couple of Roths here. Now let's do first to the 2020 and 2021. Now, also do not forget, in this case, we already have it. Make sure the client has a Roth IRA before you do a Roth conversion. If they don't have
one, if they don't have a Roth IRA in their portfolio already, you've got to create one, or doing this will do nothing. You got to have a place for it to go. So be sure you don't forget to set up that Roth.
It will do something. It'll put money in a Roth without a return. So you want to give yourself a return. Okay. That said, the amount. Let's first just do to the 22% bracket. So let's do 40K for those 2 years. Okay. And as you see, when I do that, I just barely stay in. Okay, now what was the difference by doing 80K? Open this up. And so I was at 515. I actually got more than my money back by doing that. Now granted, it's over a very long period of time, and it's assuming my heirs will be taxed at 35%, state and federal, because the money will be at the top of their bracket. But it will improve it, because we were at 515,600. Now we're at 596. Big improvement. Big improvement. Now, is it worth doing to the next bracket? Well, that's a big question. So I can go in here and do, I don't know, let's do 150,000. By the way, if you do more than the client actually has, we won't let you. You can do 100, you can do 1 million, but we'll only do it to whatever the balance is. So like I just did, I don't want to do that.
So Robert, while you're looking for the result on that, a related question to what you're talking about, how's the asset allocation and the RR determined on the Roth conversion?
Okay, so whatever you put in for your profile, if you put it 60-40 equity, you put it fixed, 3% equity, 9%, whatever it is. In this case, it's identical, 60-40, as the qualified plan is set at. So it's
when you set up the Roth account, you determine how safe or how conservative or what the risk tolerance is. It's what you plug in. And of course, you got to put your fee drag in there. So, hey, just being mindful, we're about 5 minutes more with Robert. And so if you got more questions for Robert, we got about 5 minutes with Robert. I'll stay on for additional questions, and we'll close out the call. Go ahead, Robert.
And so let's show you what just happened now. Interesting enough. Now I did 140,000. Before it was 596. That was a loser. The cost of taxes wasn't worth it in this case. So there's a fine point. And so in this case, it was a loser by as much as it's almost a break even if I did that. And that's an interesting point for the client. Doing this, $100,000 more than would put me through the 24% bracket. I got 24% Fed plus estate tax plus Medicare surcharge taxes. So doing this is going to cost a lot more money than just doing 50,000. Is it worth it? At the end of the day, I'd be almost in an identical position if I don't do it. But the good thing is you have liquidity. So that's something to talk about. All right.
So Robert, how is the taxes being assumed inside when you do the conversion? Where are the taxes being pulled from?
Whatever sources. So if you owed an additional $30,000 in taxes, well, that's another $30,000 more in income needs. If you're telling us to take from and in this case, we say pay shortfalls or all shortfalls, because now you've increased your shortfall by 30 grand. You pay all your shortfalls equally between non-qualified and qualified. Now you could mitigate this a little by saying pay it all from non-qualified assets only. That may help you a little. But the
point is you can control that, Gail.
Control that and play with that. And I'm not going to get into that because we don't want to study what's the best way for this client. This was just a case study to play with.
So you were getting ready to show a scenario, and then you're going to have to land the plane here.
Yeah, so let me quickly land the plane. So analysis. What are the last couple of things we want to make sure we don't make mistakes on? All right. Presentation. When you go down to here, this is the ideal time. This is the time when we talk to the client and educate the client. We come in here, we do a stress test, we show them it's a better, improved, and then we say, how did we improve it? We uncheck everything, and then we can check one item at a time. But instead of me picking and choosing in my meeting and trying to figure out what goes first, I can come here in analysis, and I can move these things around. So I can say, I want to talk about Social Security first. And there's a plus sign. If you look, I get a plus sign, and I click, I can drag that up. And I can drag that up. And I can say the mortgage is next. And then I can say buy my annuity third. Talk about my refinancing my portfolio. Oh, I want the mortgage up maybe. So maybe this is the order I want. So now when I come to here, I have my presentation in order the way I want to talk to my client, what I did. So I can uncheck everything now and be in a presentation mode. So I can say, first, we're going to deal with your Social Security. And I explain why. Next, I'm going to buy that annuity. And I'll explain why. I have guaranteed income, and I'm better, and I can stress test and survive no matter what I do in my portfolio. The next thing is now I can rebalance that portfolio. Oh, I can also refinance my mortgage. That'll help a little bit in my cash flow. Then I go through each item. Now I can rebalance my portfolio, take more risk. And then I can do some Roth conversions, and I can show them the improvements step by step by step. So I want to get that in order. So don't make that mistake that you come here and you're not in order. Get yourself prepared for your meeting. Finally, generating a report for the client. You'll notice we have these here, and I'm just going to type things. Your report is going to be generated as a PDF, right? If you don't have a PDF writer, that becomes a little burdensome, I hate to say, because unfortunately that's how it is. We have to build the report as a PDF for you. If you don't have PDF writer, you have to deal with our canned report as it is. However, if you have PDF writer, you can edit it. If you don't, what we've done is given you the ability to put in your own context or comments into each section. Now, here's your report. You don't have to give clients everything. The asset analysis, you may or not want to talk about that. That just lets you look at, if you have life insurance or a lot of personal property, allow them to see that incorporated. You may not, maybe you don't want to show them the notes, or you do. You want to show them a stress test. You can add stress tests, bad years and good years. And then you're going to generate your report. You can pick your indexes, whatever you want to do. Now, when you build the report, and I put AA, AA, AAA, just to show you what I mean. Well, let's build this and show it, and then I have to break.
I have a couple questions on the screen that I'll cover when Robert's done. So.
Okay. So, what did we do? When I put those inserts there for you, it allowed you to make comments. Here's your first one. So you can make comments about the planning results. If you want to make your own personal comments to explain some of the things here, you can. There's another one that will let you make, excuse me, I got this backwards. This one's to make comments about the explanations here, our general recommendations. This one here is to make notes or comments about the summary. There's one here that lets you have a prelude to how we put the actions implemented. Now, the actions implemented are very brief. Purchase annuity, 200, but it doesn't tell you who it was or what the COLA is or IRR is or anything more than that, right? So that's there, right? You can make pre-comments to that. There's another one here to make pre-comments for this. This is your stress test. So you may want to write in that section in the application back here, you may want to make comments about what you think about the stress tests. And you maybe want to say something about it. Well, whatever you write there will show up here. So it gives you the ability so that you can make comments on each section in addition to what we write. All right,
hey,
folks.
Robert, there was a question about B is supposed to be client. I don't quite understand the question there, but maybe you would. He said the word D in quotations is supposed to be client, and that was from Jim, I think, Ledford, but I'm not sure what he was talking about. And I think it was before you opened up the report. Is that so? Jim, maybe you can text us a little bit more. And I'll tell you what, Jim, would you raise your hand real quick, Jim Ledford? Robert, you go ahead and go. Thanks, Robert.
Folks, have a good time. I'll talk to you in the future.
Okay, I'm going to see you. There you go, Jim. I think I got you live.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could start doing a Roth conversion, say while the client is maybe 59 or 59 and a half to early 60s instead of waiting till they're in their late 60s to 70 to start doing that, because that's what I've been doing with clients myself.
Absolutely. You can test this at any time in the plan. It requires you to do a holistic plan, of course, early. And we're trying to get people to do this when these clients are even as early as 45. And you can do the forecasting of the plan at 30, 35. Nothing stops you from doing these analytics and charging a fee and using it for annual. But yeah, you can test the Roth conversion opportunities even in advance of retirement. All right, Gail, I see your hand raised. I think I can turn you on. So, Gail?
I think you've answered all my questions. I must have pushed the wrong button. I apologize.
All right, no problem. Okay, any other questions. So we got a hand from Scott Foster. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm not sure I got quite all the questions. So I understand on the Roth conversion that you can toggle something to have the tax paid from the non-qualified assets.
Yeah. So in the yes, I could pull that. So in the application, there's tiles on the left-hand side, and the bottom tile is like other miscellaneous. And when you get down there, it's where you can put in extra tax credits or tax deductions that the traditional tax wouldn't pick up that is kind of unique or special. In there, you can also decide how much is coming from, what's coming first. Is it qualified first and then non-qual? Is it 50-50? Is it 80-20? And underneath that others where you find it. So when you're trying to pay the taxes, that's where you would control whether it was coming from non-qualified, coming from 50-50, 80-20, and you can control where it's coming from there.
Okay, and can you do that on a year-by-year basis so that you
cannot do that on a year-by-year basis, but what you can do is plug in your scenario and do the 100% one way, 100% the other way, and by 5% increments do the test and see which one gives you the greatest lift. Now understand, you're going to make the decision year by year by what you do. You're not going to be able to project that, too many moving parts, but you're going to be able to forecast what you could do based on these assumptions, to at least have a good target for shooting your dart at the dartboard. But you're still going to use this in your account review every year to make individualized decisions as you make the decision each year where you're paying taxes from.
Okay, all right.
All right, got a question from Danny. Danny?
Hey, Curtis, just wanted to check to see if there would be a replay of last week's webinar and also today. That way.
I think that was sent out to everybody, but if you look in your email, but I'll ask Josh to send that out again.
Okay.
We're actually hiring our people to handle our websites to actually create a video library for all the subscribers on RNG. We don't have that. It may be a little bit, but we are going to have a library out there. But you should have gotten an email. And when we sent out the email introducing this webinar, it also in that same email provided to you a link to last week's recording. So we'll make sure that everybody gets access to that again.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Scott, I see you have another question?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good. All right. All right, let's make sure I haven't missed any in the text. And if we're done today, our next session, here's our next topic. Our next topic is unrealistic expectations. How do we deal with it? We're going to talk about how we deal with that in the client presentations. How do we start predispositioning our understanding so that when we get to discovery, they're giving us the answers that we can keep their expectations in line with reality. That particular webinar is going to be on July the 6th. That's a Friday after the 4th, July the 6th at 1 o'clock. So look for the invite. We'll make sure everybody has the 2 recordings that we just did. Once we start posting everything on the library, you can just go to the website. We'll be a little bit doing that. I hope you enjoyed the call today. If you have email comments, feel free to call us, email us, let us know. I see some nice comments on and then somebody was saying the video. That's because Robert went away and his screen's gone, so we don't have anything more to show in the video. But and then Scott, I think you have some follow-up questions that you want to deal with on a private basis. So anyway, thanks for joining the call. We'll see hopefully all of you on July the 6th, and if you have others you'd like to bring to the course that you're trying to interest in ThriveView or the software, feel free to bring them along. Thanks a lot.